Hello YouTube. Alright, we have the unboxing and a look at the ASUS Transformer book model T100. What this is a replacement for my Microsoft Surface RT. Now while I liked the Surface RT for what it was, I loved the hardware concept, the fact that it was a hybrid between a tablet and a computer, basically. And the operating system was the same way. It was sort of a hybrid between the two. Back then, it was sort of a newer thing, you know. It was early days. And that Surface was a great tablet. But the only thing that really held me back was the CPU architecture it had. And that was it used the NVIDIA Tegra 3, which was an ARM CPU. And while that CPU was pretty good for the time, nowadays it's not as good as, let's say, the Tegra 4 or the Snapdragon S4. And above all that, Windows on ARM is a bit awkward because you can only do so much with it. And I started noticing with the Surface RT, while it was great for doing schoolwork and all that basic stuff, I wanted it to do more and it wasn't. So I decided to sell it and recoup some of the cost. And I recouped a good bit of it. I'd say about 2/3 of it. I recouped the cost on it, so it wasn't a bad return. Obviously not as good as an Apple device, but you know how Apple devices are. They hold their value like glue. So what this is the replacement for my Surface RT. This is the ASUS Transformer book. It runs on the same concept as the Surface RT. As you can see, it is a tablet hybrid with a detachable keyboard. So it's essentially the same type of device the Surface was for me. But this one has an x86 chip in it. It's running Windows 8.1. So it's a replacement, and the keyboard's better too. There's that too. But anyway, let's get to the actual thing, and I'll explain more as we go along. As we go along. Comes with the ASUS 360 package, which is a 1-year warranty, two-way free shipping. So if this thing has an issue within 1 year, the shipping to get it fixed is free, which is nice, and you get 24/7 tech support, which I probably don't need unless there's some ridiculous problem with it that I can't figure out. So, here are the specs. This is a T100T. This is the gray one. It's a 10.1-inch LCD display. VRAM, not available. The CPU, it is an Intel Atom Z3740. Which is one of the newer Atom chips that is supposed to not suck, unlike the old ones, like the N270, N280, and the N450 series. And the N550 was actually, the N525 and N550 were actually pretty good chips. But these apparently far surpass those. We'll find out when we turn this thing on. I got this with 64 gigs of storage because with 32, you really only get about 11 or 12 gigabytes once you account for the space that Windows takes up. Optical disk drive without, because it'd be weird to have that in a tablet. It takes DDR3 1066, which is on board apparently. It's DDR3. Has AGN apparently, wireless, probably ABGN. It has Bluetooth 4.0, USB 3. Windows 8.1 32-bit, and the keyboard is a US 1, and you get a battery, and blah, blah, blah. So, those are the specs on the side. Let's take a look at the computer itself. There you go. It's just stuck. And, of course, like a lot of packaging these days, the tablet is right up front. It feels pretty good in the hand. Doesn't feel cheap. Yeah, the plastic on the back does, though. It feels a little bit cheap. There's the tablet itself. One thing that's nice about these, and why I bought it to replace the Surface, is it comes with Microsoft Office 2013 Home and Student Standard. Now that does not come with Outlook, but I don't need Outlook on here, that's fine. Here's the keyboard, which, wow, the keyboard actually has some considerable heft to it. It feels so much nicer than the Surface keyboard, which feels like a flimsy piece of crap that you could break on your knee by accident. This you'd have to really try to actually break. And of course, there's the dock up there. So that's the official tablet parts themselves. You get your activation key for Office. So I guess you enter that when you turn the computer on. A user manual, which I don't need that. USB cable for charging, and of course the AC adapter, which really reminds me of the older Apple iPod adapters. So you can tell which way the market's catering towards the Apple people. So pretty cool stuff. So I'll unwrap these and we'll take a more detailed look at them. Alright, this is the tablet itself. Come on, camera. Nice and shiny screen. That ASUS logo up there is a little bit jarring. I don't like that as much, but that's easy to get over. It's just a pet peeve. Okay, here you have what looks like a volume rocker and maybe a mute button. Not sure what that does. We'll figure that out when I turn it on. On the bottom you get the dot connector and two stabilizing holes, so which are used on the dock there to just hold it in place and stabilize it. On the right side here you get a headphone jack, 3.5mm, and you get micro USB and micro HDMI. So there you go. This might actually be, yeah, it looks like micro USB. It looks like micro USB to me, rather than mini USB. It's micro. And you get an SD card slot. And keep in mind that SD cards do stick out of the slot a little bit when you put them in there. So when you put this tablet away, like in a pouch or something, take the SD card out and put it in a bag or in its holder or something, so that you don't break your SD card in half. Because that would just ruin your day. Top looks like a little microphone hole on it. And the power button is right there on the upper left-hand corner if you're facing the screen. So that's an easy location to hit the button right there. And here's the keyboard itself, which has all the Intel inside and HDMI stickers and all that stuff. The keyboard is surprisingly tactile. When you put a very light press on it, the keys actually feel pretty tactile, which I'm very glad at, because the keys on the Surface keyboard, while the Type keyboard I had was pretty good, it was not nearly as tactile as this is. This is actually really nice. This keyboard is essentially a netbook keyboard. For those of you who used netbooks back in the day, it feels exactly like my. It feels a little bit better than my my old ASUS EPC 1015 PEM. It's the same layout, but the tactile feeling of the keys is a little bit nicer on this one than it was on that. And this keyboard, it has a little bit of flex to it when you push down hard, but not a whole lot. This is the touchpad here. Right and left click buttons integrated into the touchpad itself to save some space. Of course, up top here you have the dock connector. On the left side here you have a USB 3 port. So the USB port is not on the device itself, it's on the keyboard dock. It's on the other side. Not much really. This keyboard dock is just kind of is what it is. It's a keyboard. It houses the USB port and the input devices, and that's really it. So, pretty nice. There's the Windows 8 sticker on the bottom there. And like all new computers these days that use a UEFI BIOS, the key for Windows 8 and 8.1 is stored in the BIOS itself using Secure Boot. So if your Windows install gets hosed, you can just reinstall using the key that's built into your BIOS. So if you lose you won't lose your key, basically, which I think is a brilliant move on Microsoft's part. So let's see how these two fit together. All right, let's see how these two fit together. How easy is it to put in the dock? Oh, I heard 2 clicks there. That was pretty easy. Now it's basically like a netbook. Yeah, it's pretty much a netbook now. Look at this. This, folks, is the new netbook. It's Netbooks have gone from being low-powered budget PCs to being tablet hybrids, which I think is a good direction for netbooks. And ASUS, I like ASUS's idea here. It's a lot better executed than the Surface was. As much as I loved that thing, this is a much better idea. See, it just looks like a little netbook now, a really thin little netbook. That's really cool, man. I like that. I like that a lot. The plastic on the back here is rather cheap, though. I do not like that. But for the price point, it was about $370 on sale. I'm not going to complain too much because the hardware that's in it is supposed to be pretty good. So what I am going to do is boot this thing up, get it started. You guys know what a Windows setup looks like. I'm going to charge it as well. So the first thing I'm going to do that's recommended by a lot of the reviews is update the BIOS. So that's the first thing I'm doing out of the box, updating that BIOS. So I'll do that. I'll install Windows updates. I'll install all my programs, and we'll take a look at the specs of the machine and how it performs and things like that. Alright, it's the next day, and I finished playing around and setting up this ASUS Transformer book, and I have to say, I really, really like this. I like it much better than the Surface RT that I had, simply for the functionality and for the design, too. The Surface RT was early days for tablet hybrids, and this is really what it's evolved into, for me anyway. I can, without any convictions, say that this ASUS Transformer book is what the netbook wanted to be when it grew up. It feels like a new netbook. It has the same keyboard as the ASUS EPC 1015 PEM I had before. In essence, this tablet feels like a more modern version of an EPC from back in the late 2000s. The only difference between back then and now is that the specs are better and the processors are much better, so the usefulness has just gone way, way up on stuff like this. So even though it's an Atom CPU, it's not the Atom's CPU of back in the day. It's not an N270 or an N280 or an N450 or an N550 or anything like that. It's a whole new generation of chip. The Intel graphics in this thing are actually pretty good, and that's one perk about this thing. It has Intel graphics. So you're not dealing with those power VR graphics that I saw some Lenovo Windows 8 tablets running that couldn't even handle fresh paint properly. So things have definitely refined themselves. This Transformer book existing, to me, proves that Microsoft introducing the Surface was a success. They introduced the Surface not really to sell all that well, but to introduce an idea to the marketplace. And ASUS latching onto that and coming out with a hybrid tablet where you can remove the screen from the keyboard dock, really shows that they took that idea and ran with it. And that's exactly what Microsoft was trying to do. And so in that respect, they were very successful. This keyboard is so much higher quality than the Surface one. The Surface keyboard I felt like I could break in half over my leg by by accident. This keyboard, the keyboard is actually more rugged than the tablet itself. Like, the keyboard feels like it's higher quality than the tablet, which is bizarre, but it's true. And that's mainly because the back of this tablet has that kind of cheaper plastic, but you know what? For the price point, that's really not a big deal. Obviously, the biggest benefit to this tablet is that it has an x86-based CPU. It has a 64-bit Atom processor, but this device only has 2 GB of RAM, so obviously they're only going to run the 32-bit OS. It's an Intel Atom Z3740 CPU running at 1.33 GHz. Uses Intel HD graphics. Uses a Broadcom wireless adapter, which is excellent. Broadcom makes excellent wireless chips. Uses a SanDisk SSD, funny enough. It's an Intel Atom CPU. As you can see, there are 4 threads. I believe with these chips, I think it says quad core on the box, but I'm not sure if it's quad core or if it's just dual core hyperthreading. I'd have to read up on that. I'm really not sure, but it's one of those two. And it appears to have a TPM module in it. So I guess you could do BitLocker on here. Yeah. there you have it. Intel sound. Not a whole lot of USB stuff going on. Yeah, there you go. It performs very well, this computer. I was very surprised at how well it performs. I installed two things to test it graphically. I installed a Second Life viewer to test out OpenGL performance, and I installed Minecraft to also test performance. Now in Minecraft, I got, let's see, I turned the settings down a little bit. I turned the graphics to fast. You know what, let's look at the settings real quick. Okay, I had these are my graphics settings I had it on. I put the smooth lighting on minimum, put the graphics on fast, put the particles on decreased, and made the max frame rate about 60. And that gave me between 8 and 15 frames per second. Something that on paper sounds horrible, but is actually quite playable. But, that being said, that was also in an area where not a lot was going on. It was literally just standing in a room where full of glass and dirt and stuff, and nothing was really happening. So I imagine when there's a lot going on the screen, the frame rate would go down. So I would not recommend this tablet for playing games like Minecraft. I'd recommend this tablet for other stuff. I tried a Second Life viewer as well, and that tested OpenGL performance pretty well as well. Funny thing about that, though, is that I turned the graphics down to their lowest settings, and I was able to walk around. I was able to go into a very populated area and not have too much of a slowdown with lag. I was very impressed with that performance. I didn't think that would happen. Minecraft is actually a little bit more demanding on this particular system, which I found a little bit strange. Usually it's either the other way around or both of them just cream the GPU. But in this particular system, Second Life actually performed pretty admirably. So it does handle OpenGL much better than any previous generation Atom chip ever did. So the Atom chip in this thing is excellent. Absolutely excellent. I can't recommend that enough. One thing that really impressed me about this tablet was the sound quality. The speakers on this are phenomenal. I haven't heard tablet speakers this good before. Like, they get really loud and they're just great. Like, here's my sort of intro video to my channel. Just for an example, I'll turn the volume all the way up. You can hear that it sounds pretty good. Nice and clear sound. Not a whole lot of bass, obviously, but it gets the job done, and it's loud enough to hear. Unlike the Surface. The Surface speakers were absolutely miserable. Yeah. Comparing that to the Surface speakers is night and day. The speakers are so much better on this than they were on the Surface RT. Other things I tested on here, your basic applications like a copy of Word 2013 it came with is nice and zippy. Works great. Haven't had an issue with it. It's your basic, it's basically a modern netbook. And I think that's a good thing. This is where the netbook technology was rudimentary. This is what it has evolved into, and I think that's a great thing, because netbooks themselves were pretty cool when they came out, but I knew they could be more at the time. They didn't feel like they felt kind of like an experiment. This feels like something that was thought through and put together with a little bit of mindfulness for what the user could experience. And not only that, it pedaled off of the Surface hybrid tablet idea, which I think is great, especially with this keyboard dock. This is excellent. The only thing I kind of wish that they had done differently is put the USB port on the tablet itself. That's about it. But I don't think they did that because the form factor of the tablet just wouldn't allow it. I have a mouse plugged in there right now, so I can just be fast with it. Now, as far as the tablet hardware itself, that I've had a chance to play with it, I'm very impressed with the keyboard. It feels just like some of the ASUS netbooks from a couple years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, except a little bit more tactile, which I like. The trackpad, I'm not a huge fan of this trackpad. It feels a little bit strange, but it's usable. It's completely usable. It's sensitive and everything. So there's nothing wrong with it. I had no trouble installing my Windows 8 apps on here as well. Halo, Spartan Assault, Fruit Ninja, all the other stuff that I have on here. I have not tested Windows 8 apps graphically, but those two apps I tried earlier seem to work pretty well. So this may just be a first impressions video or a small review if you like, but so far I think this tablet was a great idea and the execution was really, really good. I really like this tablet, and I think ASUS has definitely knocked one out of the park with this one. A lot of reviews online stated a lot of issues with this tablet, like some people would say it would stop booting up after a while. And I think a lot of that was down to the BIOS it was running at the time. This thing came with the up-to-date BIOS, and from what I was reading online, people were saying that you should just update to the latest BIOS, and that fixes all the weird, quirky issues this thing has. Well, this was updated from the factory, so I think that those issues have been fixed now, despite all those weird problems in the beginning that this thing had, according to the reviews. Now it's a nice device. It works extremely well. I like it a lot. So, this device, I think in general, was a brilliant idea on ASUS's part. It pedaled off of both the Surface idea of the hybrid tablet and the netbooks that they have had for years. They were king of the netbook back in the late 2000s with the EPC series. And this really harkens back to that, especially with the keyboard design and the trackpad, and just in general the way it feels. The form factor of this is so nice. It's thin. It's everything a netbook should have been back in the day, and it's even better now that it's in a tablet form. So, absolutely brilliant execution on ASUS's part, and I definitely commend them for it. It feels like a product that was really well thought out, as opposed to some of the netbooks back then. The netbooks really felt like they just tried to squash a low-powered laptop into a box and then gave it to you. This actually feels like it was thought out a little bit before they did that. So, definitely a recommended buy for me if you're looking for sort of a hybrid tablet. Skip the Surface and get something like this that has a keyboard that won't break in half in your hand. Well, the Surface keyboards won't. I mean, mine lasted as long as I had it because I took care of it, but they do feel kind of flimsy. Even the Type keyboard feels a little flimsy. This keyboard, though, is fantastic. Much, much better than the Surface keyboards by a long shot, just due to it being tactile. So my first impressions of the ASUS Transformer Book T100 are very good. Very, very positive. So if any of you guys are looking for a hybrid tablet that runs x86 software, I highly recommend getting one of these. And specifically the 64GB version, simply because you don't get a whole lot of space when Windows is installed. This being the example. This is a 64GB one, and it came with it came with basically 30 gigs free. And this is after I've installed everything. I installed a bunch of Windows 8 apps, and that brought it down from 30 to like that. And you know, that extra space is nice. It does have an SD card slot, but the SD card sticks out a little bit. That's my really only complaint with this thing, that they didn't recess the SD card slot like they did in the Surface RT that I had. That's about it. Other than that, it functions just like any other computer would. Only that it has the hybrid tablet aspect. So, this tablet's awesome. It's just plain awesome. And that's my review of it. I plan to use this for school, for doing schoolwork and taking notes and things like that. So that's what this is replacing my Surface for school. So I think this will be great to take to school. It'll still fit in this netbook bag that I have. I've been using this bag since the netbook craze back in 2009. So it's useful to have these around. And that just shows how much this harkens back to the days of the netbook. So, there you have it, guys. My review of this particular tablet is positive. Definitely get one. If you're on the fence about Android or iOS, don't like either one, and you want a Windows ecosystem because you're familiar with it, definitely get this one because it's worth every penny.
This is what the built-in webcam and the built-in microphone sound like in the ASUS Transformer Book T100. As you can see, it's a pretty bog standard, grainy webcam type of quality. The microphone sounds decent, I guess. It's nothing to write home about, but it gets the job done. This is the type of webcam people would use for teleconferencing, basically, and that's really it. And for maybe quick videos like this, uploading to YouTube. But other than that, it's just meant to get the job done, and that's exactly what it does. It's nothing to write home about, but it doesn't suck, so good.
So this is just all around a much better buy than the Surface RT ever was for the x86 processor and just for the hardware. The hardware on the Surface was nice, but this I think was a little bit more well thought out, even though it uses cheaper materials. It's kind of a trade-off either way, but the good outweighs the bad on this particular tablet. So my review on this, I would give it probably a 9 out of 10, to be honest with you. I take off one point for the cheaper materials, but being it a $400 tablet or a $300 and something tablet, if you get the 32 gig version, you can't knock it too hard for that because it's that price point. But there you have it. So I think I'm going to really enjoy using this tablet, and I definitely would recommend it to anybody. It's fantastic. Hope you enjoyed this video, and have a good one, everybody. Ciao.